Hello, I'm Morgan Cederblom, owner and CEO of Business America, the one-stop shop for all the services and connections you need in order to build your consumer brand right here in the United States. For more information about what we do and how you can get a hold of me, please go to businessamerica.biz. I would love to hear from you. So welcome to this second episode of my series of interviews where I'm talking to experienced and interesting people that I know can add value to you and your company. And today is a special day because today I have a great pleasure of speaking to Roy Hadley, who is one of the best legal minds I know and an accomplished businessman and advisor on all things related to building a business. And I've known Roy for many, many years. And he's my go-to guy when it comes to all legal matters as it relates to building an international business in the United States. Roy is also a strategic partner to Business America with a lifelong experience in helping clients get started and grow a business. Roy, it's a pleasure to have you on.
The pleasure is mine, Morgan. I am just thrilled to be here. We've been great friends for so long, and many business ventures later. So I'm just thrilled to be here, thrilled to be able to offer any thoughts and advice that I have in furtherance of, helping businesses come to the United States and sell their wares here. Something that you are, kind of what I call the guru of doing. So just happy to be here and excited about our conversation today.
Thank you, Roy. Always good to be with you and looking forward to that discussion. I know that our viewers would like to know some more about your background and experience a little bit before we get into the different questions. So please share a little bit about that with us, please.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking about that. As you said, I'm a business lawyer. I have been at it for many years. I started off in private practice. I was in-house in corporate America for a large chunk of my career. Bought and sold companies, chief privacy officer of a company, but what I bring to the table and what my background allows me to do is I've been on both sides. I'm a lawyer, yes, at a firm now and can help with all the legal stuff, but I've also been involved with the operational side of businesses, international businesses. And so can bring to the table kind of the advice and wisdom of having sat in that seat, and you likewise, you have been involved in businesses. And so when you give advice on what a business should be doing, you're not just giving it as an advisor, but you're also giving it as someone who has sat in their seat. And I think that's the kind of advice that really is helpful to any company that is contemplating doing business in America.
Well, thank you, Roy. That's nice of you to say, and certainly a very impressive background. Roy, you're one of the most unusual attorneys I've ever met. Not only are you a great legal mind, but you have a business acumen that is second to none, and you understand how to build brands. Many times when I look at the new brand, I come to you and ask for your opinion on it. And you've been right 9 out of 10 times.
But we're not going to talk about that one time.
No, but Roy, you're a true asset to any company. So very excited to have you on this discussion. So really, what I wanted to do today is to focus our talk on legal issues that surround an international company and what they should be aware of when it comes to legal issues as it relates to starting a business in the United States, which is a huge step for many international companies and a step that many dread taking because of all the complexities and so on. So, and you're the right person to have on this discussion, absolutely. So to that end, my first question to you, Roy, would be, so if you're an international company and want to launch your brand, your business in the United States, is it necessary to set up a U.S. company? And if so, why?
Right. Great question, Morgan. And I'll preface this. I'm going to put my legal hat on here for a second and give kind of a general disclaimer that anything I say today really isn't or should be considered legal advice. As you will see in this discussion, all of these things have different issues. They have complexities that you really should hire an advisor such as yourself or legal help to navigate through your particular circumstances. So again, you'll see those complexities kind of come to forefront here. So a good example of that is going to be the question you ask, and that is, what type of entity should you be setting up? And really, you should set up what I would call a corporate entity, and that's going to be an LLC or C Corp or something like that. A lot of times, it just depends upon what you are trying to do with respect to the entity here. If you're doing it and you plan on maybe selling that entity separately, growing the brand, you might consider setting up a C Corp, an Inc., because those are going to be easier to sell because you have shares. If you're not, you might consider an LLC. That's a little bit easier to set up, a little bit easier to operate. What I will say, though, is the threshold question of should you set up an entity? Yes, you should, because as I think we're going to discuss a little bit later, you're going to need an EIN, an employer identification number from the IRS, and that's going to allow you to pay taxes, set up bank accounts, and all those sorts of things. So the answer is yes, you absolutely need some type of corporate structure, because that corporate structure is going to allow you to get your EIN. It's going to allow you to set up your bank accounts, and it is going to allow you to have employees and to have withholdings for them, and all of those things that are necessary to run a business, to get a business license. You're going to need a corporate entity to do it. Again, what type of corporate entity, an LLC or an Inc., is going to depend upon your particular circumstances, and is going to depend upon what your goals are. But, it's easy to navigate through that checklist and decide what type of entity, and then get that entity set up.
Excellent. Very important information indeed. What are some of the documentation that you would need, Roy, in order to set up an LLC, for example? Give me some examples of the documents that you need to have.
Right. So, you're going to have to decide on the ownership of that entity, whether the foreign entity is going to own 100% of the entity here in the United States. Sometimes you have situations where the foreign entity is going to be working with a partner here. And so, you'll have to navigate that in terms of your bylaws or your operating agreement. But, those are the kinds of things you are going to need. Let's just say it's an LLC. You're going to need an operating agreement. And an operating agreement is a legal document here in the United States that really sets forth how that LLC is going to be governed, how it's going to, operate the business, quite frankly. It's going to, if you have multiple owners, say you have the foreign entity in a partnership with a local company or a local person, is going to set forth how voting happens, how the board of directors happens, how the elections of officers happen. And so that type of document is going to be instrumental to setting up your LLC and running your LLC. And most times banks will want to see that operating agreement before they will allow you to open a bank account. The equivalent on the corporate Inc. side, if it's a C Corp, is going to be the shareholders agreement. And that's going to basically outline the same things, but it's just going to be tailored to be a C Corp. Again, you're going to need the EIN. If you have a C Corp, you're going to need minutes. You're required to have minutes, which are the meetings of the company, the meetings of the board of directors, or in an LLC case, the meetings of the members, to memorialize what you did. Things such as who has signature authority to bind the company, and what levels of those, who, again, is going to be an officer of the company, Can you buy and sell the shares of the company? All of those sorts of things are going to be in the minutes and in the operating agreement or shareholders agreements. So those are the threshold documents that you're going to need. Obviously, you know, when you incorporate, you're going to get a certificate of incorporation from the state in which you incorporate. You know, and that again is going to be one of those documents that you're going to need in order to open a bank account and or get a business license and really function as a corporate or business entity here in the United States.
Well, good. So you mentioned a state, you know, required documentation. So that brings us to the topic of where do you set up the company? We have 50 states in the United States. Right. I oftentimes hear that it's better to set up a company in Delaware, for example, than anywhere else. Now, could you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of setting up companies in different states and why, if there are any differences in that regard, and where you should look first?
Right. So, you know, that is a great question, because you often hear, I hear the same thing you do. You know, should I set it up in Delaware? You know, that's what everybody says. Should I set it up in Nevada because they have better tax structures and those sorts of things? You know, what I would say to somebody coming in is keep it simple. You know, if you're coming in and you're going to be, you know, your headquarters is going to be in Georgia, incorporate in Georgia, you know, your US headquarters. If it's going to be in New Jersey, incorporate in New Jersey. Most times, you know, it's just easier to incorporate where you are physically going to be located. Now, that said, you know, taxes can play a pivotal role in that decision-making process, because different states do have different corporate tax structures. So, you know, all being equal, one of the things that you would want to look at is, you know, what is the tax structure of that state for businesses? Some you know, states have lower tax, you know, taxation, some have higher. So for example, California has very high taxation structures with respect to corporate entities. Some states have lower. So, you know, again, all things being equal, you know, look at that because that may be the deciding factor for you. In terms of corporate protections and things like that, generally speaking, you know, without getting too in the weeds on it, most states will provide the same level of corporate protection under, you know, either an LLC or C Corp, you know, and then S Corp, which is a tax kind of allocation type thing. So again, you know, the things I'll look at is, you know, when I'm deciding or helping somebody to decide where you're going to be doing business primarily, you know, then look at the tax structure of that. And then again, we can make the determination of whether we're going to do an LLC or C Corp. But those are the things to really look at it. Again, Delaware is great, particularly if you need to do something quickly. You know, Delaware does have a very good infrastructure to their corporate entities, and so they can do things very quickly. I've had instances where I have created Delaware corporations in an hour or less, and, you know, various complicated structures where you would have one corporation created, you fund something, it's dissolved, you know, blah, blah, blah. But that's when you start getting into very complicated structures, corporate structures, which in most cases with what we're talking about would not be the case. So, you know, there really isn't a lot of reason to jump through those Delaware hoops, because most times in terms of a business coming into the United States, you just don't need.
Well, that's a great overview, Roy. And looking at the wonderful backdrop of Atlanta, Georgia, I can't help but mention and maybe plugging Georgia, because Georgia has been rated as the #1 state to do business in for many years. And we have very low taxes here. I think it's 5.25%. And something like that, and very little red tape. So we would love to see companies consider Georgia as well. It's fairly easy to set up a company here as well, right?
That's correct. I mean, Georgia, again, not getting into the legal weeds too much, has what were considered the uniform kind of practices around corporate formation, limited partnerships, LLCs, those sorts of things. And so Georgia, with respect to corporate entities, really is at the forefront. And, in terms of ease and simplicity and protections. And like you said, Georgia generally has a very low tax rate, comparatively speaking, with respect to corporate entities. So it is a very favorable climate. And oftentimes, again, it's just easier to do it here in Georgia than somewhere like Delaware or somewhere like Nevada that, you hear about all the time. I think a lot of times people, read about something on the internet and make a determination, but most times that determination really doesn't apply to them. And so they can do things easier, quicker, cheaper in somewhere like Georgia than other places.
Great. So then let's just segue into the issue of profit taking. So you set up a company, LLC or an Inc., depending what your circumstances are, you get a legal advisor such as yourself to help with that process, and I highly recommend that. Then you start your business and you start generating sales and profits. So then the question becomes, okay, so where do I take the profits? Do I bring the profits back to the parent company that may be located in Europe or Asia or South America or somewhere else around the world, or do I take the profits in the United States? Could you give us your point of view on that, on that subject as well, please?
Absolutely. And, that's a great question. And, I'm going to give the same kind of disclaimer that I gave earlier. It just depends on what you are trying to do with your company. A lot of times, you'll want to keep the profits here so that you can then use those to reinvest into, your business. A lot of times it depends on where you are and, what kind of tax treaties may be in existence between the US and your particular country. Sometimes those can be favorable. Sometimes those cannot be favorable. Sometimes it depends upon your citizenship, oftentimes, or sometimes you'll find business people that have dual citizenship, both in the US and in a foreign country. That can impact how those profits are taxed and what you can do with them. So, on the profit taking, two things. One is going to be, what are you trying to do? If you're trying to grow the business here in the US, oftentimes it is advantageous to keep the profits here so that you can reinvest them into the growing business. The second thing is always going to be taxation and how those profits are taxed and what kind of tax treaties that you have in place. That may make a difference as to whether you keep those profits here or, take them, repatriate them back to your home country. Another thing to consider is just going to be, if you do leave them here, sometimes you can't leave excess profits in a corporate entity, according to the IRS. And, they may look at you and say, okay, we're going to tax them anyway, because you're holding too much for your business needs. So there are lots of things to consider in terms of what you do with the profits. But what I will say is that's a great problem to have, because if you have the problem of what are you going to do with the profits, that means you're making profits. And that's, just a good problem to have. But that's something that you'll want to work with your accountants, work with your lawyers to see, what's going to be most favorable to you in accordance with your goals for your business. And I often say, even though I'm stressing the taxation part, don't let the tail wag the dog. And so, look at what you are trying to accomplish with your business entity here in the US, and then let that be the primary focus, and then deal with the taxes in a favorable way. But don't let the tax tail wag the corporate dog, so to speak.
Great advice, Roy. So profits are good.
Yes,
and
profits are very good.
Yeah, and a key asset, another key asset of a company is a trademark.
Yes.
And so how important is it to protect your trademark going into the United States? And what is the process like if you haven't done it already? Could you give us some guidance on that, please?
Absolutely. Intellectual property, which is what a trademark is, patents, those sorts of things, trade names, are critically important to a business that's thinking about doing business in the United States. In a perfect world, you would have gotten the trademark in your home country, and then because of some international protocols, be in line to have it here. But let's just assume you haven't gotten your trademarks registered or your trade names. Then you would want to work with your legal advisor and file for those trademarks and trade names with the USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It's not an overly cumbersome process. They've done a good job of streamlining it, making it a little more simple than it used to be. But it's going to be critically important. The thing I will say, though, is you want to get on it quickly. And when I say quickly, really before you start to think about selling in the United States, go ahead and file for those, trademarks and trade names. Two reasons. One is it's going to take a while to get them. It's not a 1 week or 2 week process. The process of trademark, getting a trademark, you have periods where people can object and blah, blah, blah. So it may take over a year to actually get the trademark. Now, that said, you can still operate as if you have it. And I often tell clients to operate as if you have it. So that means like putting, the trademark symbol next to that name, the trade name that you're using. And then once it's registered, finally at the USPTO, you can put the circle R that you see, which means it's a registered trademark. But the good thing about a trademark application is that it's going to, there are certain things that you can do to protect that name and get almost what is called a common law trademark in that name, while you're going through the process with the USPTO. So again, there are things that we can do to help protect it while you're operating here in the United States until you get that trademark. But getting that trademark is going to be critically important because that is an intellectual property asset of the company, just like a patent would be. And depending upon what you're bringing in, your beverage or your whatever it may be, you may even want to think about applying for a U.S. patent. If you have a unique formulation or something like that, that would help, in that instance.
Very good advice, Roy. Of course, you can help with all of these matters that we're discussing today on this discussion. This brings me to the last question in this conversation, and it's about cybersecurity. You're one of the leading experts on cybersecurity in the United States, and we've seen a troubling trend, increasing, crimes of cybersecurity in the U.S. Against companies and also abroad. So what advice would you give companies that plan a U.S. launch in this area?
Again, cyber is the great equalizer now in good ways and in bad ways. The same kind of technologies that allow you to reach, far and wide with respect to your businesses are often the same things that can be cumbersome and damaging to your brand if, intellectual property is stolen. And what I tell businesses is you really have to make sure that you're protecting your brand. And, that means the trademarks and all that, but it also means the cybersecurity. It means making sure, that your service providers have adequate security in place, making sure that your service providers have, security postures that you're comfortable with, making sure that your employees here are trained on anti-phishing and not clicking links and things like that. So you're really trying to adopt a posture of cybersecurity, but you have to look at the data that you have, your customer list and things like that, as critical intellectual property that is going to be helpful to growing your brand and growing your business. Sometimes research and development, things like that, you really want to protect. So, you know, those are critical things that oftentimes businesses overlook because they say, well, it'll happen to somebody else, but it very well might and probably will happen to you at some point. So, you know, I tell businesses it's absolutely critical to look at it, because anything that you have, your data and stuff like that, is a business asset that you need to protect, just like your brand name, just like your trademarks, just like you know, any other intellectual property that you may have.
Well, thank you, Roy. It's been great speaking with you today. All that advice and knowledge that you have is certainly of tremendous value to any client, customer, company that is thinking about coming into the United States. And it's such a pleasure to work with you and being able to consult with you when clients need your area of expertise. And you can connect with Roy through Business America. His contact information is on businessamerica.biz, and he's one of the strategic partners. So Roy, it's always great to see you. Thanks for all the advice you gave us in this chat. And I hope you contact us and let us know if we can help you with any plans of getting into the United States. But
and the thing, Morgan, that I would say to somebody listening here is, you know, having somebody like you is going to be very strategic to their success. You know, coming to the U.S., just like going into any foreign country, you have to understand the nuances. You have to understand the laws, the rules, the regulations, branding, trademarks, all of those sorts of things. And so having somebody like you, and I've seen it live and in person, is going to be very a strategic decision. And so, you know, to somebody listening, you know, coming in to the US can be very lucrative, but it can also be fraught with many landmines that, you know, somebody like you can help navigate. So I would say absolutely, you know, a call to Business America would be great.
Thank you, Roy. Good to hear, and thanks for that endorsement, and really appreciate your time. Hope to see you soon again, maybe over lunch in the near future.
Absolutely.
And, in the meantime, take good care of you, stay safe. And for all the listeners and viewers, please go to businessamerica.biz if you would like to know more about our services and how to connect with me and how to connect with Roy Hadley. So thanks. Look forward to seeing you next time when I will have another interesting professional and knowledgeable person tell us about their area of expertise. So thank you so much.
Pleasure's mine.